Hey everyone, Cleus Glory Young here. So I'm here again, as usual, um, in nature, or should I say God's house. Um, I did the video yesterday, and it really made me started to think about a lot of things. Um, I looked at it from yesterday that before and prior to all the videos that I was doing, I was highlighting this as nature, being in a natural environment. And it was up until yesterday that things just revealed to me, and it was like, no, this is not nature, not just nature. It's like from the question was who created all this, like from the trees, the water, the land, the insects, the birds, like who created all these things. And it just dawned on me, yeah, consciously I'm aware that it's God, but the part that I never really put two and two together was realizing that this is God's house. So I really sat down yesterday and I started to think about a lot of things, and I'm like, oh, I need to make a part two of this video that I did yesterday. And I think I'm also going to make a part three too, because today I just want to cover certain things. And I know some people may watch the video yesterday and like, oh, this is not God's house. To each his own. For me, this is God's house, and I'm identifying it as God's house. No longer will I sit down and really think that this place that I used to go to and on a weekly basis, right, is God's house. I don't care what nobody wants to say. They can't prove it beyond just the reality of what is being said. And there's a lot of questions that came to my mind, because it was like for years and years and years we've been taught that this is God's house. And then here comes the pandemic, and the pandemic now allows these places to be shut down. And why am I looking at this? It's shut down as in the pandemic is something that's unexpected. It's unexpected, it comes with fear. When it's unexpected and it comes with fear, it's overwhelming for a lot of people. And in this time of our life, we should have the best resources to deal with this unexpected, fearful pandemic season. And we don't have it, because the place that's supposed to make us our best is closed down. And I know, yeah, we can go online, but it's not the same. Like, I'm talking to someone in person, it's not the same as me talking to them online. There's a different social context that comes with when you're in person. That's how we develop our skills. Beyond just seeing someone, our social skills need to be developed. So when things like this happen, we can actually relate to it and now be in a moment where we can cope with what's going on, so it's not knocking us off our feet. So for me, like, I could really go into this and looking at this from that angle, because what I started to look at is like almost like saying that we've been fooled. All these years we're thinking that this is the place that is essential to our upbringing. And I'm here in this place, which I call God's house now, or nature as some people would call it. And I'm telling you what I've been getting out of this within the past couple of weeks. I've gotten more out of it than I've spent my entire life in these places that we used to call God's house. You know what it does for your body, your internal organs? when you're able to sit in an environment like this and you're getting natural purified oxygen, you know what that does for your internal organs? You know what it does for you when you're sitting by the water and you're listening to the sound that comes from the water? How therapeutic that is to your brain that works based on sound waves. So I'm not sitting in an environment where all I'm hearing is bang, 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 or wah, wah, wah. Like, it's a different level of operation that happen when you're in an environment like this. So yeah, I talked about how Jesus went to the mountain yesterday in yesterday's video, and the relevance of Jesus going to the mountain. I talked about how Moses got the 10 commandments, the same 10 commandments now that are being utilized, as in these are the elements that help to shape society. But where did Moses get them from? In the mountain. And the same thing now that happened while he was getting those 10 commandments, like he met God there in the mountain. So where do you normally meet people? Like right now, where you at? You're at home, possibly. And if someone would come and meet you there, they met you at your house. This is where you'll get the best of you. So the context of that is looking at it, Moses got the best. And it's because Moses met where? God there, at the house of God. So I'm highlighting this beyond just, okay, it's nature. Like, if you listen to that, that's a bird chirping. And that context right there is looking at it and saying, the bird called this their home. This is a habitat for so many species. It's like an ecosystem that runs on itself. We don't need no man to operate this. It runs by itself. Things fall down, but it replenishes itself. And it does it naturally. And for me, I started to look at it like, at some point, we were a part of this. This is what we used to call home. And then something happened and we now got industrialized. So we move away from this type of living and then we go into society now and we create a new home. And then we suffer in those areas. Because I'm coming up the hills today, and I'm looking at the level of this, like these different trees that I was seeing. I'm like, yo, you must have been here like for years, like centuries. And it's like, how do you have that substance to like maintain whatever happened in the earth for all these centuries? Like, I'm looking at this one tree right there. That's probably like 100+ years old. And right now, man is like dying off. You reach 70, it's like you're on your deathbed. Some of our teenagers, they don't even look to see if they're going to pass 21. But beyond that, I wanted to make a part 2 of the video that I talked about yesterday, because it opened up so many things. And one of the things that I'm going to be talking about is just reading some materials and then analyzing them. And it's quite interesting because yesterday, not only just yesterday clicked for me as in this is God's house, I had to go home and I searched for something, and then I found it. So I want to read something and I'll show you how interesting this is. Starting off, it's a story, so I'm reading chapter 1, or part of chapter 1. I won't get into the full context of it. It says, in a small village just beyond the mountains, listen carefully, beyond the where? Mountains, there dwelt a group of villagers. The people lived as a strong supporting family. Everybody knew each other, helped each other, and had fun with each other. The village was a place of brotherly love, yet nobody knew about it apart from the tight-knit community of people who lived there. So it's talking about the mountain, and the mountain is called the village of brotherly love. Just looking at that, you know where I'm at now? I'm in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is also called the city of brotherly love. But look at this. Let me continue to read. One day, while in search of herbal medicine, an old man and his grandson happened to find this place among the bushes. All right, the bushes. All right. It was the grandson who forced him to go beyond the regular route that they traveled daily. So the regular route of what I thought before of what is God's house was the four walls that we go to on a weekly basis and worship. So listen to what this is saying. It was the grandson who forced the grandfather to go beyond the regular route. The two stood silently and observed the villagers as they went about their ways. Based on what they observed from the arrangement of the housing, the villagers seemed like a group of people that cared for one another. Grandfather also had a warm feeling inside, and he knew that something was good about the village. It was not long before they decided to introduce themselves to the people of the village. The villagers were startled by the sight of two strangers entering their village, but grandfather and David had a harmless look. The leader also had a warm feeling about the two, for he and the rest of the villagers gathered around them with no form of weaponry, just a hand stretched forward. Once the introduction was pleasantly made, the villagers did not hesitate to show these two strangers the warm meaning of brotherly love. The two strangers felt right at home. Grandfather carefully noticed that the village consisted of old, young, short, and tall people. No matter how old or young they look, they all had a zestful look along with a slender body tone. They were full of vibrant energy, and this allowed them to move quickly and freely while they went about their ways. There was nothing slouchy about these villagers, and it reflected in the warm feeling that grandfather sensed. So I'm going to stop right there, but what took place so far in the story is that these two strangers were going into the mountain and looking for something, herbal medicine, to help the grandfather's sickness. The grandson forced the grandfather, hey, let's go beyond the norm and go up more. And when they went beyond the norm, they found this place which is called the village of brotherly love. Hear this carefully. This book is called The Mountain of Miracles. And I wrote that book 20 years ago. I wrote this book when I was living in the Pocono Mountains. I was never aware that there was a city that is called the City of Brotherly Love. I wrote this book as in my first book that I ever wrote while I was living in the Pocono Mountain. This is like 2.5 hours away from where I'm at right now in Philadelphia. I had no idea that I was going to be living in this city, a city that is called the City of Brotherly Love as well. I had no idea that I was going to be sitting here, right here, 2020, and I'm talking about this place being called the house of God. What happened in this story is that this story is talking about how two strangers went about and go beyond the norm and found this village, and this village now started to give them what is called miracles in their life, which is why it's called the Mountain of Miracles. So 20 years ago, I had an understanding that a mountain can give you miracles based on the story. I had no idea that 20 years later I was going to be sitting here, right, and saying that this is God's house. You know how they receive miracles in this book? From God. So in the story that I wrote 20 years ago, I'm saying that they receive miracles from going up in the mountain in God's house. And then here's it. Listen, when you hear this and saying the village of brotherly love and the city of brotherly love, like how? I couldn't do that on my own. So listen to this now. How did I write this book? I was dating a young lady back then. And one of the things that I used to do was based on the fact that I could write poems. Like on a monthly basis, I would write her a poem. So I wrote her this poem and I was emphasizing how I could see our future like this. And it detailed in the poem. I wrote her poems before, right? But this one particular poem, when I kept on reading it, it was like, wow, you can write a story about this. So what I did, I sat down and I wrote a 2-page story about it. When I wrote the 2-page story, I was like, wow, I could turn this into a book. But at that time, I didn't know how to write a book. The only thing that I knew how to write was a poem. So what I did the night, I recall, I went to my bed and I prayed. I prayed and I said, okay, God, could you give me the wisdom, the knowledge and understanding of how to write a book? I woke up the morning and I just took the 2 pages that I wrote and I just started expanding on it. And before you know it, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, all the way up to chapter 7. And the book was completed. Never written a book in my life before. But from that one prayer, this was what came out of it. And it's talking about a village of brotherly love. I'm now living in a city that's called the City of Brotherly Love. And I'm now in a mountain that's saying miracles could happen here because this is God's house. And from yesterday's video, I showed you how Moses too got his miracle by going into the mountain. That's how Jesus prepared his sermon. So look at this now. And I don't want you just to take it from Cleo's word, what I've written. I've written other books over the years. This has been the scariest book that I've ever written. Over the past 20 years, I've been monitoring this book and how certain things was applicable to my life. When I used to teach, you can ask my co-teacher, because we dissected these things too. I can give you the proof, talk to her, and she'll tell you like, yeah, we saw the reality of some of the things in the book. Beyond that, I want to show you something now. I'm going to read something. And it's not my book. It's the religious book of Christianity. And it says in Psalms 121, and you can go read it yourself, because don't take my word for it. Go read it. In Psalms 121, it says, I will lift up my eyes unto the hills. I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills. Where am I sitting now? I'm in the hills. And listen keenly to what it's going to say afterwards. From whence cometh my help? So the book that I just read, the story, grandfather and David went into the mountain and they got their help. Jesus went into the mountain. Jesus got his help. Moses went into the mountain. Moses got his help. And here in Psalms 121, it's saying, I will lift up my eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. I didn't make this stuff up. It didn't say, I will lift up my eyes to the sky. It says, unto the hills. Unto. That means it has to be a part of it. All right. Listen to this other part now. Same biblical aspect. Now we're going to Matthew 5. And it says, and seeing the multitudes, he went up into a mountain. And when he was set, his disciples came unto him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So I'm going to skip and then I'm going to go to verse 14. Verse 14 says, Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Listen carefully. Ye are the light of the world. You know what that really means? You're the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. So if you take that city life and you put it on the hill, something is going to happen to that city where it cannot be hid anymore. But if it remains a city, it can be hidden. So these are not my words. From yesterday, I just started to think about certain things. And as I'm thinking, it's like these things just started to connect to me. And I'm like, all right, why didn't people tell us these things? And it's like, why would I want you to be your best? Because if you're your best, I can't govern you. I can't control you. Like, when I come here, the things that are being revealed to me is like, times whatever you get in the building by 100. It's reality. Like, this is God's house. I read from the book that I wrote 20 years ago, right? I read from the Bible that's written 2,000 years ago. I didn't make this stuff up. But I've been coming here for quite some time now, and it was just yesterday, just dawned on me. Click. And when it clicked, it's like things just started to open up. And I'm like, oh my goodness. No one has ever told us this. Like, this is God's house. The ecosystem that's here, like, it naturally operates by itself. And no man can ever shut this down. None. I've never heard of a man that came and shut down nature. None. And it's like I started to look at it as like, this is where you can be your best. And here's why I looked at it that way. Based on what's going on now with the pandemic, it's an unnatural environment. You can't be in an unnatural environment and become your best. You have to step out of that environment and go into something that's natural. So coming here, you're going to be in a natural environment, and it allows you to see what's really going on in that unnatural environment. In an academic field, there's a process, it's called timeout. Timeout is where you move an individual from one area and put them into another area. And some of the times that works. You know why? Because in that one area where they're given the trouble, you have to move them out of that environment. There's a small environment there, so you have to move them out of that and then let them go to a new environment. So when they take a timeout, that's why they would now go to a different environment. Even though it's in the same classroom, each environment, like where the desks are, they're different. It's like an ecosystem in the classroom. So when you put them into a whole new environment, it allows something to change within them. And that's how they'll be able to calm down. And that's the same thing. When the pandemic is going on and you're in an unnatural environment, you need to move and go into a natural environment. It so happened this is what I declare as God's house. And there's no man on this earth that could come and tell me any different. I wrote this book 20 years ago. I would never thought that from me writing a book that I would live in a place called similar to the book that I wrote and talk about the city of brotherly love and the village of brotherly love. And now I'm sitting in a mountain on top of the hills and telling you like, hey, this is what's happening in my life, which is ironically like that's the story. So it's not something that I'm making up. But just as grandfather was pushed beyond the norm, that's how you have to push yourself above the norm of what you were taught before. The COVID-19 or pandemic have taught us that, hey, we need to push ourselves to go beyond what was originally the essential things that we thought were essential. Now we're coming up and we're like, oh, there's a new type of essential. And it's like, you got to push yourself beyond the norm. And if you don't, I know this for a fact, we're going to continue to be in the same place century after century after century. Because we have allowed these things to be taking a hold of who we are and saying this is the norm. This book right here, you don't know what it did for my life. I've had a lot of conversation with different people over the years. And based on this book, when I listened to what they were saying, I didn't sway to be persuaded by what they were saying. Because I have this book as a reality. Something happened in this book. During the development of the book, and that stuck with me forever. So when I hear people say certain things, like, I know that's not the reality for everyone, because I recall like the process of me getting this book published and the things that I went through with it. But something particular came out of it, and it really made me now have a different experience of how I look at life. And that's why I'm able to push beyond the norm sometimes. And I'm sharing that with you. If you never push beyond the norm, like, who is telling you that this is God's house? No one. Go on your timeline. There's no one that's telling you that this is God's house. And that's me. I just like pushing things beyond the norm. Because if we don't, then we're going to be in the century of a cycle. The same cycle in the century. Over and over again. We do the same thing over and over again. And what Einstein said, that is insanity. Because we're expecting a different result. You're in an unnatural environment right now. Go spend some time in a natural environment. And just as this says, whether it's the book or the scripture, it's like, unto the hills from whence cometh your help. Like there's something here that could help you in life. It's not something that I'm making up. I'm seeing it as a part of my life. I'm just doing the due diligence of saying, hey, how could I get other people to experience something similar to this? So this is for me. I'm getting this for my own life. There's no one on this earth that could come up to me and tell me about those four walls is God's house. No one. And if you want to say, oh, Cleus, you're going to go to hell. Okay, so what? Because you don't even know where you're going. But for me, I'm seeing this as the reality of God's house. No man can ever shut this down. And miracles happen if we spend enough time here. It can happen. Because this is where, like, how does this tree live to be over 100, probably 200 years? And nobody is coming here and taking care of it. That's a miracle in itself. How is it that this environment is an ecosystem that operates by itself? Like nobody come here and take care of this day by day? None. And it naturally happens where it takes care of itself. That's a miracle in itself. So if you're spending time in this environment, it's going to rub off on you where you can start to what? Take care of things for yourself. And if you're in God's house, then spend some time and talk to God. That's what I do when I come here. Beyond just the therapeutic aspect, is like I relax. And it's like when your body is relaxed, your mind is relaxed. It's like your organs are relaxed. It's like you begin to revitalize your organs, which is the main component of your life. And you know what oxygen does for your organs when it's purified in its natural state? That's what here does. So it's not something that I'm just making up. It's a reality. It's up to you if you want this to be a part of your reality. But in the meantime, I'm going to be enjoying it. I'm going to get back to what I'm doing. And as usual, be safe, be healthy, and do things to increase your sanity. God bless.